No single ballot measure has shaped California government more than Proposition 13, approved by voters in June 1978. To understand why it passed, you have to feel the pressure of the moment. Through the 1970s, California home values were soaring, driven by population growth, limited housing supply, and national inflation. Because property assessments were tied to market value, tax bills exploded. For homeowners on fixed incomes, especially elderly people who had bought their homes decades earlier, rising property taxes were a genuine threat of being forced out of their own houses. That was a real grievance, regardless of broader politics. Other factors stoked the fire. Assessment scandals and reforms had brought sudden large tax increases for some owners. A state Supreme Court decision required equalizing school funding across districts, which made some homeowners feel their property taxes no longer benefited their own local schools. And government spending and public employment had grown faster than the economy. Into this environment stepped Howard Jarvis, a retired manufacturer and tax activist, along with Paul Gann. Their initiative qualified for the ballot and passed with roughly two-thirds of the vote, support that cut across income levels and party lines, though notably with much weaker support among African American voters, reflecting lower homeownership rates. So what did it actually do? Four key things. First, it capped the property tax rate at 1% of assessed value. Second, it rolled assessments back to 1975 values and limited annual increases to 2%, or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. Third, it triggers reassessment to current market value only when a property changes hands or is newly built. And fourth, it requires a two-thirds supermajority of the legislature to raise state taxes and a two-thirds local vote for new special taxes. The consequences were enormous. Property tax revenue dropped about 60% in the first year, forcing an emergency state bailout of local governments. The state took over primary responsibility for funding schools and distributing property tax revenue, which centralized fiscal power in Sacramento and reduced local autonomy, an ironic outcome for a measure descended from the decentralizing populism of the progressive tradition. California's once top-ranked schools saw per-pupil spending fall relative to the national average, prompting later measures like Proposition 98 to set a minimum funding guarantee. What's most remarkable is its durability. Despite all these consequences, Proposition 13 remains popular. Governor Jerry Brown famously called it the third rail of California politics. Even a 2020 attempt to reassess only commercial property failed at the ballot box. Prop 13 stands as the clearest example of how a single initiative can entrench fundamental change that proves nearly impossible to reverse.